Hello and welcome to the Ilene Silverman Show. I'm your host Ilene, and on this week's program, our guest Helen Frankel shares her story as a second-generation Holocaust survivor and how she is coordinating the history of the Holocaust and valuable life lessons for teaching in our Alachua County schools. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us for our program. I'm delighted to introduce my guest, Helen Frankel, founding member, nextgenerations.org. And Helen, I'm so pleased to welcome you to our show and to have you here. And as a new friend here in Gainesville, ever since I met you, I've been wanting to have this opportunity so that you could share with our viewers your story and your family's story as a second generation survivor. And so exactly kind of help us understand, when we say that, what does it mean when I say second generation survivor?
So a second generation survivor it's really the child or the children of Holocaust survivors of the Holocaust that came here or survived after the war.
All right. So your family, of course, has their own story, your mother, your father. And so can you share a bit of that with us now?
Absolutely. So both of my parents were survivors. They lived in Poland. My father was a survivor of Auschwitz and the Lodz ghetto. My mother lived in a part of Poland that was closer to Russia, and which is now Ukraine. And she survived by escaping the ghetto, where all the Jews lived at the time, were forced to live, escaped into the woods to a farmer's house, but mostly lived in hiding for almost 2 years in the woods.
I mean, just listening to this, it's just incredible. Every Holocaust survivor story I've ever been privileged to hear leaves me with a sense of all that they carried on and made new lives for themselves, that they survived at all, like your mother and like your dad. And I'm sure every time you tell this story, which has been something very important for you in your life, this all comes back to you time and again. And I know your folks aren't living now, but their stories are there within you. Mm-hmm. And how did your folks get together and become a married couple? And
well, after the horrors that they went through, my father was in Germany at a displaced persons camp to help bring back his strength and have a place to live. So organizations took care of that. My mother, on the other hand, went to a displaced persons camp in Italy, outside of Milan. So she had to escape through the borders, through the Alps, to Italy, and stayed there for about 2 years. So it was about a 2-year transition
to get out of Europe.
And you had to be sponsored by somebody, a relative or a friend of a family that would sponsor you to come to the U.S.
Exactly.
So when family members found out that they were the only survivors of their entire families, they set about to start the sponsorship programs and brought them here.
Right. So the story, I know you can't get into all the details, but in your youth and in growing up, was this something your folks shared with you? I know some families do, some don't. Did they tell you kind of bits and pieces?
That's a great question. You know, there's something about when you grow up, you pick up on things as a child.
And you told me at home they spoke Yiddish.
They spoke
Very Eastern
Yiddish, they
European.
spoke Polish, but they only wanted us to speak English. And so they spoke English to us, but
They wanted you to take on your new country,
yes,
your new homeland.
yes, and it helped them as well to learn the language.
Right.
So,
and to find their way.
and
in
to
this new
find their
country. No
way,
easy thing.
which was a very difficult thing because they came here without any family, still grieving all the loss, not knowing the language, not even graduating high school. I mean,
Right.
you know,
and
all
everything
of that.
in their lives interrupted in a way that's hard to even wrap our brains around.
It's beyond
It-
belief.
It is. It is
And
beyond belief. And we're going to take just a quick break and then we'll be back to chat more. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back talking with Helen Frankel, second generation Holocaust survivor. And Helen, to continue the story, which each time you tell it must still tug at your heart, how did you get a sense of this story from your mom and your dad? And from those around you, other Holocaust survivors that you were among as you were growing up?
Well, I realized, like I said, from a young age, I knew something was different because their language was different, their customs were different than my other friends. So, you know, as a kid, you just want to fit in.
Right.
But I knew something was different, and sometimes I would see their sadness, or there were times where I could see them crying, and I would ask them, you know, especially my mother, what happened, why are you crying? And she would just say she was thinking about her family without going into any
Detail of the fact
detail
that they
until I was older.
Right.
And as I grew up, I knew that they were not really with other people that were American. There were always just Holocaust survivors around.
There was a difference.
There was a difference, and they spoke about their stories when they were together, and being able to understand Yiddish and Polish, I picked up on it.
You could start to piece it
I
together.
pieced it together, and I remember one time just finding a picture of the concentration camps and the bodies and all of that. And I knew then, you know, what had happened and put it all together. That it was really horrific that so many family members, all of them, had died, had perished.
Yes. When we talked about cousins, and I'm telling you about the Safer family of Jacksonville and hundreds of cousins, and you suddenly looked at me and said, we don't have any cousins. We don't have family. We only have the few.
Yeah,
that has stayed with me, Helen. That was a moment of recognition.
Yeah, there were hundreds of family members on both sides.
All gone.
And the only two that survived were my mother and her sister. And on my father's side, his brother and himself.
Right.
And there may have been some distant cousins
But
here
this
and
is
there.
who you knew.
Yeah.
And well, I've heard the term survivor's guilt, both that could apply to your parents because they survived, or to a second generation. is that a term that has figured into your life?
Generally, yes, there is survivor's guilt. In my personal experience, I would assume that my parents and their friends and other relatives felt that.
Right.
But I think maybe it was more internalized. They didn't really
Speak of that.
Yeah, about that as much as, the fear and the anxiety that came along with all of
this.
Yeah.
And you and I spoke about Steven Spielberg and years back, his initiation of collecting survivor stories, the oral histories of people and what they went through, people like your mother and your dad, and now you, who have given your own oral history of your remembrance and all that you know of your family's history and what that has meant. And it's sort of what has propelled you in your mission in life to let people know.
Yeah. I think the Shoah films that Spielberg did really changed the whole perspective on Holocaust survivors. It wasn't really that then.
Right.
But it gave that a voice and it gave a platform. It took many years for people to talk about it.
Right.
And a lot didn't want to talk about it, but it was a great platform to get all that on record. And now we have that. So next generations now, as the survivors are getting older and dying,
Right.
we are the closest witnesses to what happened
Right.
to them. And for me, to honor my parents, their parents, all the relatives, everyone that perished, the 6 million Jews that perished, that is so close to my heart because that's really who I am. Like, I
Right.
shouldn't be
You're
sitting here right now.
All these people are behind. I see they're all behind you. They're part of
Yeah.
you. You're speaking for them.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's your honor
it's a
and
miracle
privilege.
that I'm here
It is.
because they survived. Now I'm here. Now this third generation, my
Right.
children and other third generations. So it's just,
And it's so you have it. You feel that you must go forth, tell the story, share the story. One, so people know, understand, and we don't forget. We're going to take another quick break. Thank you, Helen. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're talking with Helen Frankel, second generation Holocaust survivor. And Helen, tell me about the nextgenerations.org, of which you were a founding member.
well, nextgenerations.org was founded in 2004 by Nancy Dershaw. I met her at an event and I was looking for something to join that involves second generations, and she had this idea to put it all together. And one thing led to another, and
Kind
we
of clicked.
kind of clicked. Grassroots, we dug in, and there were about 4 or 5 of us who are still active today, most of us. And we just started this organization and started putting on events for the community, brought in speakers, had social events for second generation survivors.
Right. Bring people together.
To bring people together, to talk about our shared experiences, what it was like to be a child of a survivor, because we do have so many similarities.
Right.
And over the years now, this organization has grown and grown and grown.
Right. It's doing many different things.
Doing many different things, but one of the things that's so important is our education that
Exactly.
we devoted. For this, we have a speakers bureau, and we go into
Right.
the schools and teach the lessons of the Holocaust.
And in the state of Florida, describe the mandate for teaching that.
Yeah, so the state of Florida is only one of 15 states in the United States that Holocaust education is mandated, which means they must teach
Right.
about the Holocaust. So we are taking advantage of that.
Definitely. What grade is it usually taught? Or?
Usually it's 5th through
Right.
12th. So
Okay,
the
depending.
lessons have to be age appropriate.
Right.
And we've developed curriculum for that. We have lesson plans.
Right.
And some of the
Very
other,
well thought out.
yes,
it's
we
a
have
whole
educators.
system of knowledge.
Yes, and it's taken quite a long time to get
can
this
see.
to where it is today. And the other thing about Next Generations is we have a grant. It's the next Nancy Dershaw grant, and we help survivors in need. And there's
Oh, yes.
many that live below the poverty lines, and we help them with money and living expenses and all of
Right.
that.
And which is so meaningful if you think all that someone did to survive, to come to a new life, and that somewhere there, anyway, just the thought that you could help people
Yes.
at this point as in their older years makes a tremendous difference. And for you, now that you're in Alachua County, you've turned the corner to Alachua County Public Schools and
Yes.
said, okay, what are we going to do here in my new home?
Yes, it was a goal of mine when I knew I was moving to Gainesville. I wanted to do what I was doing or what we were doing in Palm Beach and Broward and South Florida with the schools and some of the speaking that we do. And I really thought it would be, if there was any way I could get into the school system here, that would be great. And then COVID hit.
And then everything, even going to school was harder. Everything was going online. But you have persevered, Helen.
Yes.
You were not derailed by COVID or
It
any of these issues.
it-
You have moved forward.
It actually, in a way, helped because we went to a Zoom platform and
Right.
now we can do it anywhere. So,
Which still you have to develop this whole process for Zoom, and that
yeah, it was a
is
big
another level.
transition.
Yes.
It was a big transition.
And we're going to talk more about that. Just take another quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're back talking with guest Helen Frankel. And Helen, go back to Alachua County Public Schools. Tell us how this has evolved.
Okay, so having moved here almost a little over 2 years ago, one of my dreams was to take what we've done in South Florida and bring it here. And I was able to get in touch with John Rem, who is he handles all the social studies programs
Right.
for Alachua County. And when I told him what our format was from Next Generations, and that we were able to put all these lessons on a PowerPoint for Zoom,
Right.
he became very interested.
He went, this is important knowledge.
Important knowledge. So our coordinators and our educators have put together this curriculum, and so he looked at it, and
Right.
we had several meetings, and before we knew it, in 2020, he said, can we do this by the end of the year? So last June we did 20 schools or so.
Quite impressive.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, you
So-
started and moved forward quickly.
And it was just fifth grade.
Right. Okay.
Fifth grade.
Right.
And
But what a pivotal time, fifth grade, at the end of elementary, going on to middle school. And I can see, looking at your curriculum, there are many life lessons that are very relevant now in today's world that are part of that history.
Yes, so we teach the lessons of the Holocaust, and it's very relevant today with racism and bullying and anti-Semitism. So we teach about bullying, how to stand up to a bully, how to be inclusive,
How to appreciate the differences in people, not see that as a negative, but embracing diversity.
yeah, and all these lessons are age appropriate so the students can understand it, and to be an upstander, not a bystander,
I love that phrase, an upstander.
to take action or speak out if you see something that's going on in the school, or to friends or a sibling that, just don't stand by and let
Right.
it happen, because
Then you're part of the problem.
you're
when you
part of the
stand by.
problem. And when it becomes a whole country like that, this is what happened in the Holocaust, and there's so many lessons to be learned from
There
that.
are.
Yeah.
And your own testimony, which people can find on the website nextgenerations.org. But tell us more about that.
So several years back, we decided as a group for Next Generations to create like our own little Spielberg oral testimony. And instead of interviewing survivors, it was second generation, children of survivors,
Right.
what it was like for us growing up with
Right.
parents that were survivors, and how it affected us in school, and how it helped shape who we were.
And of all those testimonies, there's something special about yours, Helen.
Well, there are other people that are involved in it, but yes, I'm one of the people that were interviewed. But it is now in Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum in Israel.
Right.
So it's a great honor,
That is.
and we're very proud of all the work we've done and hope to make a difference.
I feel we're privileged that you have moved here and are able to bring these life lessons to Alachua County, to our public school children and beyond. This is a growing program, and we're inviting viewers, let me say quickly, to reach out, to be a part of it, and to help the program grow. And I want to thank you, Helen, for sharing the story of your family. I feel very connected to you, and I feel privileged, as I said, that you are part of our show and have invited our viewers into this part of your life and history. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you. And I'm so glad you tuned in, and I hope you'll join us next week. Take care.
We are the children of Holocaust survivors. Ours is a story of what it was like to grow up and live as adults in a world where our parents suffered immense persecution, trauma, loss, and forced immigration. Ours is the story of living in the shadow of the Holocaust as children of the eyewitnesses. Ours is the commitment to tell our story, to carry the torch from generation to generation.